Hey, iostux here, #1 private Overwatch coach over on iostux.com and former head coach for organizations such as NYXL and the Boston Uprising. As is customary with first-person shooters, finding a sensitivity that suits you is crucial in optimizing how well you can aim. Today, I'd like to revisit a method I personally designed years ago to find your perfect sensitivity, called Perfect Sensitivity Approximation. The old video attracted hundreds of thousands of views, and after multiple years of professional coaching since, I've revised and improved the method. Before I explain how PSA works, I quickly want to explain how we define a good sensitivity, what changing your sensitivity can accomplish, and what it can't. Ultimately, your sensitivity is just a conversion factor between your mouse's DPI value, which you can usually define in the software that came with your mouse, and the actual rotation in-game, usually defined as a centimeters per 360 value, describing how many centimeters you have to move your mouse to make a 360-degree turn in-game.
Yikes!
Having a sensitivity that's not optimal comes with three main downsides. If your sensitivity is too low, you can experience something called lazy aim, muscle fatigue, and inhibited mouse movements. Lazy aim happens when larger turns in-game become such a hassle that your situational awareness suffers, since you'll be less likely to look around in-game. Muscle fatigue is pretty self-explanatory. If you need to swing your arm around a bunch for every turn, your muscles get tired after longer play sessions, leading to inconsistent aiming performance. And inhibited mouse movements happens when your sensitivity is lower than your mousepad space allows. If you run a very low sensitivity, but don't have the mouse space to accommodate it, you'll subconsciously be afraid of hitting the edge of the mousepad, your keyboard to the left, or even your PC to your right. Because of this, as you approach the edges of the mousepad, your brain will inhibit further movements, meaning that even though you want to do a certain movement, your brain inhibits it to prevent you from slamming your mouse into your keyboard. Second, if your sensitivity is too high, however, it can lead to cramping. If you use a high sensitivity and a fast mousepad, maybe a hard plastic one, you'll have to grip your mouse very tightly to be able to control it accurately, especially for finer movements required for long-distance aiming. Not only does this make aiming incredibly difficult, it also leads to hand cramps over time, which obviously also isn't optimal when it comes to aiming consistently. And lastly, having a sensitivity that isn't optimal can lead to you simply needing longer to warm up. We want to find a sensitivity that is intuitive to us. That way, we become accustomed to it much quicker after picking up our mouse at the start of the day. If our sensitivity is lower or higher than it should be, we have to warm up longer to try and adjust to it. So now that we know why having a personally customized sensitivity is important, let's figure out how to find our perfect sensitivity. One of the main changes to my old PSA video is that I now distance myself from the idea that there is one single correct sensitivity for a player. In practice, I found that for most players, a small range of sensitivities is perfectly viable. For example, if you go through the PSA method and determine your optimal sensitivity to be 2.5, you'll be able to perform just fine with a sensitivity slightly lower or higher than that, for example 2.3 to 2.7. This is important because some players tend to change their sensitivity frequently, which is a terrible habit and completely crushes your mechanics. Changing your sensitivity by small amounts, around 10 to 20%, won't make a significant difference in aiming performance. Changing your sensitivity from say 3 to 3.4 isn't going to have an effect on your aiming performance. Going from 3 to 5, however, is a significant change that can have a positive or a negative effect on your aim. So how does the PSA method work? It's an iterative heuristic designed to find our optimal sensitivity. The idea is that we want to find the sensitivity that is most intuitive to us out of the gate. To ensure that our previous sensitivity doesn't color our results, I highly recommend taking a break before going through this procedure. If you do this method right after playing the game, you'll be biased towards your current sensitivity, since that's the sensitivity you're most warmed up on. If, however, you take a 3-day break and then go through the PSA method, you won't have any bias towards a specific sensitivity, since you'll feel cold on all of them, allowing you to discover the best sensitivity independent of what you've been using so far. To start things off, head to the practice range and pick any character. Head over to the two stationary bots standing side by side right outside the spawn. First, we need to choose a starting point sensitivity. For Overwatch 2, I personally recommend 4000 EDPI, for example 800 DPI and 5 in-game. This is the average sensitivity for professional players and will minimize the amount of iterations we need to go through until we find our optimal sensitivity. Once we have our starting sensitivity, you want to calculate two new sensitivities off that, a higher one and a lower one. The formula to calculate the higher and lower sensitivity is as follows. S lower upper equals Si plus minus 2000 over 2 to the power of I. S refers to the current sensitivity, I is the current iteration we are on. As the numerator, I've chosen 2000. This will give us a final sensitivity that is fairly close to our starting sensitivity. By increasing the numerator to a value of 4000, for example, you can get potentially higher or lower sensitivities, although the process will take an extra iteration until you reach a result below the error threshold you're after. From my experience, 2000 as the numerator and 4000 as a starting value for S gives DPS players good results. Players who play more mobile characters like Genji or Lucio may want to use 3000 as the numerator instead, or use a higher starting value. So let's start with S equals 4000 and I equals 0. If we place these into the formula, then our lower sensitivity is 4000 minus 2000 over 1, and our higher sensitivity is 4000 plus 2000 over 1. So 6000 EDPI and 2000 EDPI respectively. Now that we have our lower and higher value, go in game and adjust your sensitivity to be those EDPI values. So if we use 800 DPI, for example, we'd use an in-game sensitivity of 2.5 for a lower sensitivity and 7.5 for a higher sensitivity. To determine which of the two sensitivities we'll use for the next iteration, we do two simple exercises. The first is doing 10 quick 180-degree turns, and the second is locking our crosshair onto a training bot's head and doing long strafes side to side for around a minute, while keeping our crosshair as steadily on the bot's head as possible. Do this for both sensitivities and see which one you feel more comfortable on. You want to choose a sensitivity that didn't make your hand cramp while tracking the bots, while also not exhausting your arm too much when you did the 180s. Let's say that we preferred 6000 EDPI over 2000 EDPI. Maybe 2000 EDPI was just too tiring. To calculate the next iteration's starting sensitivity, we need to simply average the previous iteration sensitivity with the one we prefer. Si plus 1 equals Si plus S preferred over 2. So in this case, S1 equals 4000 plus 6000, which is 10,000. Divide that in half, and we have 5000 EDPI. And there we go. Now we simply increment I by 1 and use 5000 EDPI as our new starting value. So let's calculate the new upper and lower sensitivities. S upper lower equals 5000 plus minus 2000 over 2 to the power of 1. Our new upper and lower values are now 6000 and 4000. Change your sensitivity in-game to the value you'd like to test, do 10 180-degree turns, and track the stationary bot's head while doing long strafes side to side. Choose which sensitivity you prefer and calculate the next iteration.
Here we go again.
Let's say that this time we preferred 4000 EDPI. Simply place that into the formula and we'll find that the next iteration is 4500 EDPI. Don't forget to increment the iterator. S2 equals 5000 plus 4000 is 9000, in half 4500. Let's do one final iteration to practice. Insert 4500 EDPI into our initial formula to calculate our upper and lower sens. Don't forget to always increment the iterator. That way our fraction approaches its limit of 0. If you forgot to increment the iterator, the approximation won't ever end. S lower upper equals 4500 plus minus 2000 over 2 to the power of 2. As we can see, our new upper sensitivity is 5000 and our new lower is 4000. Go into the practice range and test them the same way you tested the previous sensitivities. Choose which one you prefer and calculate the next iteration of our sensitivity. Let's say we preferred 4000 EDPI. S3 equals 4500 plus 4000, over 2, which results in 4,250 EDPI.
That's pretty good.
As you can see, with each iteration, our sensitivity changes by a smaller amount. We started at 4,000, went up to 5,000, then to 4,500, and now to 4,250.
Nice.
We went up 1,000 EDPI, then down 500 EDPI, then down another 250 EDPI. And as we continue, these changes will become smaller and smaller. Technically, you can run as many iterations as you'd like, which is what I recommended in my previous video on the PSA method. But remember what I said at the start? From my personal experience, aim coaching for the past few years, players have perfect sensitivity ranges rather than specific perfect sensitivity numbers. So I personally recommend iterating until the fraction in the formula for the upper and lower values reaches a value smaller than around 5% of our starting sensitivity. 5% of 4,000 is 200, for example. This means that around 4 to 5 iterations should be enough to give us a sensitivity within the significance threshold we have set for ourselves. There is also value in executing this heuristic multiple times. You should get very similar results each time, but having multiple samples can ensure that we don't get inaccurate results to extrinsic circumstances. For example, if you did a lot of sports before doing the PSA method, your arm might already be exhausted, giving you a bias towards higher sensitivities that are less exhausting to play with. Also keep in mind that this heuristic should be repeated in case your setup changes. If you use a new mouse that's lighter or heavier, or you use a new mouse pad with a different material or size, you should rerun the PSA method to get updated results. If you have any questions about perfect sensitivity approximation, head over to my Discord and ask in the #AskStacksAnything channel, or check out iostacks.com to learn more about my aim coaching and Overwatch coaching services. My name is Iostacks, and I'd like to thank you for learning.